Well, good day my friends, it's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. Today we are focusing on kind of a sad time in US history. We are in Washington DC and we are going to see Ford's Theater, where Abraham Lincoln went to enjoy a play and ended up being assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. See, the street sign says where Lincoln's legacy lives. Here it is. After a long, hard-fought war, it was said that Lincoln was actually feeling pretty optimistic when he came here that night. He was kind of feeling like the country was in a good place. However, John Wilkes Booth, someone who hated Lincoln. He hated everything that Lincoln stood for, and he had actually been devising a plan to kidnap Lincoln. So he came here one morning, actually that morning, to pick up his mail, which was always delivered here. And he was sitting out here on the front step, it was said, reading his mail when he overheard someone inside saying that President Lincoln was coming here that night. So he decided to put his plan into motion, except he wasn't going to kidnap President Lincoln this time. He decided he was just going to kill him. So what he did was he went inside, went up to the box, and carved out a little niche that he could put a stick in to block the door when he goes in later. His plan was to go in about 2 hours after the show started, and during the biggest laugh he was going to attack Lincoln. And that's the line to get in and tour and look at the museum and everything. I bought mine in advance because I think you have to. I bought mine 2 days ago, so we're definitely going to get in today. And then our tour also includes the Peterson boarding house over here, which is where after he was shot, they rushed him over to this boarding house and into one of the bedrooms where he suffered away until his passing. Last time I was in DC, I tried to come here, but when I showed up, they said, well, we can let you in, but the museum is closed today and the theater isn't going to be open for another 2 hours, and the Peterson house across the street is closed because of COVID. So I was like, you know what, I'd rather just come another time. So that other time is today. John Wilkes Booth came from a pretty well-to-do family of actors. His father was an actor, his brother was an actor. His brother was actually big on the northern side. He was pro-Union and was fighting for the Union. So after John Wilkes Booth did this, he wrote a letter to their sister and said that he was disowning John and that he no longer had a brother. It was said that Lincoln had a premonition of his own death. He would have dreams that would foreshadow the changing point in the wars, and he had had one right before this and felt like things had made their final change. So imagine that carriage bringing him here that night. And the Smithsonian actually has the top hat that he was wearing that night for that performance. Just think of him being let out here quietly. The show had already started, and her and Mary Todd were joining some people up in the box here and went in without fanfare. Booth apparently came around 9 o'clock, an hour after, came in through the back alley, checked his horse with someone who worked at the theater, and then went under the stage and went out another door and hung out at a saloon for an hour, and then eventually came in and made his way up to Lincoln's box. And John Wilkes Booth did have conspirators that he had talked into doing this, but they weren't necessarily supporters of the effort as much as they were fans of his, that were they were kind of glad to have someone who was famous and notable and, you know, charming and charismatic, wanting them to be a part of their circle of friends, kind of. We're gonna start with the theater. Wow. I can't believe I'm here. Right up there. After Booth shot him, he threw his leg over the banister And his spur got caught in that American flag ribboning. So when he jumped down to the stage, he ended up breaking his ankle. Man. I want to go upstairs and see the seats up there. Now we're in the top. So his seats are right there. It was actually shot right behind the ear, but at the time nobody could see where he had been hit. Even though John Wilkes Booth was highly regarded in his day as an actor, and they even said he was like one of the first people that had his clothes torn off by ecstatic fans after a show. By this time he was 25 and he had been acting in theater for 6 years and seemed to just not be interested in it anymore. All the travel and everything, he just became obsessed with everything that was going on in the world. They found a letter from his agent saying, "You don't even seem like the same person anymore." And it looks like this yellow door probably is what they would have escorted Lincoln maybe behind there. Because I didn't see a stairwell that took you up there. I only saw one. So they probably took him with the stairwell. We came in through that door. Because there was supposedly another door. From what I read, there was a guard outside of here. And Booth was so well known that he had like a calling card he could show people that would let them know that he was okay to pass. And it was like the guard's first day. So he let him in, he got through that first door. And there was another door and he barricaded this door right here while he shot Lincoln. Right in there. And here's a view from across. Wow. Puts it into perspective. He also pulled out a knife and slashed the man that was up there with his wife that was watching the show with Lincoln and Mary Todd. If you take into consideration him jumping off there, that is quite a jump. He got his spur caught in the flag up there and then jumped down onto the stage floor. That's quite a jump, so. He kept writings after he did this while he was on the lam. And he basically still felt like it was the right thing to do and basically made himself a martyr, talking about how painful it was that he was riding through these swamps and forests on horseback with a broken leg, jarring in the stirrups every leap and bound. Lincoln was not dead here though. He was examined, and then when they went to take him away, someone at the Peterson boarding house across the street told him to bring him in there, like I said earlier. Only thing I'm not sure about is which side, like which one of the wings he escaped through. But I know he ran out into the alley, got on his horse, and took off. And that actually one of the workers here was named a conspirator for helping with his horse. So the stage is set for Little Shop of Horrors because they still do shows here. It's crazy to think Booth wasn't even in this production that was happening this night. He was just getting his mail here because he had been in a show here 2 months before and was getting his mail sent here then, so. Theater owners knew him, nobody suspected anything. Just to think of what would have happened in that seat right over there.
Shame they got started so late. Probably would have made it.
Here's another bust of Lincoln that you can tell people rub the nose of for good luck.
Get out of here.
Although saying good luck at Ford's Theater is probably not the greatest idea. Now let's go to the museum. Had to bring Lincoln down the stairs, through this lobby and out the doors across the street. Alright, let's take a gander around this museum. There's a nice statue of him right next to an image of the theater we were just in for a nice half-hour performance that I couldn't film and show you. But it was pretty good. The great Mr. Lincoln. He actually thought that he was not gonna be re-elected when he was. The war had just ended 5 days before he came to Ford's Theater, and he was shot on Good Friday. Here we have some of the people that were named as co-conspirators. Even the lady that owned the boarding house that Booth was staying in was sentenced to death because she knew about the kidnapping conspiracy, which was Mary Surratt here. Like I said, mainly they were all just doing it because he was so famous and well known that they were all just kind of like honored to be in his circle of friends. Here he is. There is an image of Booth shooting Lincoln, and he actually did it with a Derringer, if you can believe it. So they have that Derringer right here in this case on display. I did not know that that was here, but I was hoping. It says the gun that killed Abraham Lincoln, right there. With a single shot, John Wilkes Booth changed the course of American history. The gun he chose was a .44 caliber pistol made by Henry Derringer of Philadelphia. One shot was all Booth had. Yeah, after he got his mail and found out that Lincoln was going to be here on this day, he convened with all the co-conspirators, or most of them, and set out for a plan to have one kill Johnson, Vice President Johnson, which did not happen. And Booth got his Derringer ready to make sure that it would be ready for the evening. Can you believe it? Crazy times. This thing says, to display or not to display. After Lincoln's death, the War Department kept the murder weapon. In 1931, they refused to request to display it with other items at Ford Theater, stating that the relic should not be allowed to be displayed to the public under any circumstances. But then they transferred the gun to the National Park Services in 1940, and it's been on display ever since. And the handgun right there was Lewis Powell's gun, and he was sent to kill Secretary of State Seward. He didn't end up using the gun. He ended up trying to slice his throat with a knife, but apparently Seward had fallen off a horse and had his jaw wired shut. So when he tried to cut him, he actually missed the jugular because of the wiring and everything, but he was disfigured for the rest of his life from that. When Booth escaped, he went out to a doctor's property named Samuel Mudd, and Samuel Mudd worked on John Wilkes Booth's leg and gave him a place to stay for a couple of days till they realized who he was, and this was the medical kit that he worked on John Wilkes Booth with. When he figured out who he was, since Booth was armed and Dr. Mudd had kids and a family and everything, he asked him to leave, so he did. At the time they offered a reward, but it was actually the highest reward of all time, the $100,000 reward. because they just didn't know where Booth and his accomplice that had escaped ended up. It says that this is a pocket knife that John Wilkes Booth carried with him on his escape that night. Oh, that's really crazy. That's the compass. He actually got help along the way, and they gave him a compass and put him in a boat, and he was supposed to row all night to Virginia to safety because he figured further south he got, he would get more help. But he actually read the compass wrong and went north instead of west and ended up in Maryland after all night. So he ended up in the wrong place. Wow, that is the boot worn by John Wilkes Booth. You can see where it's been cut open in the center when they were working on him. Dr. Mudd was working on him. And they actually have the spur. Booth left them at Mudd's house. So that was the spur. Could have been the one that got caught in the flag up there. Caused him to break his ankle. But that also means that that's the boot that killed Abraham Lincoln. And that top one is a Spencer carbine that John Wilkes Booth carried during his escape. And then the others were guns that they found at the boarding house. He was staying at Surratt's boarding house. Oh wow, what's this? I see a handful of things. I see a door right there that had a broken lock at the time apparently also. So the gloves were Mr. Rathbone, who was watching up there with the Lincolns. There's that door wedge, that piece of wood right there. That's the door wedge that I mentioned that he had whittled out like a little hole and was gonna jam that in to block the door. That's the theater box door. And they have a sampling of the original wallpaper that would have been in there when it happened. You see this hole right here? That was a hole that Wilkes Booth used to look into the theater box. That's what it was for. The theater box owner had drilled in there so they could look in if they ever needed to, like a peephole. So he was able to see where Lincoln was before he entered. That's one of the pillows that they used under Lincoln's head over at the Peterson house. He ended up dying the next morning. You can see there's blood stains on it. And that is a reproduction of the coat that he was wearing that night. It's a floor-length wool coat. So there's a table in this case, and that table is Lincoln's from the White House. So everything that's on there, his shaving mug right there, that silver mug, was his. The gloves were worn by Mr. Lincoln, those white gloves. You can see his crystal inkwell here in the front. A paperweight. And then that chair in there was also used in the White House, and the shawl was a gift to the Lincolns by their children's tutor. And it was thought that General Grant was going to be Lincoln's guest here that night. They'd even put that in the paper. After the seats were purchased, the theater put it in the paper, but General Grant was not here. As we come out, the bar that he was actually hanging out, Booth was hanging out and drinking in, waiting for the time to come to go in there and wait for that laugh, was right here. It was called the Star Bar at the time. Now let's see the room he died in. I think they would have brought his body right up these same exact stairs. Crazy if you can actually see that room. It says that Secretary Edwin Stanton directed all the functions of the executive branch from this room. while the manhunt for Booth was going on and while Lincoln was basically laying in the other room dying. Someone had to run the country. So right here's the bed. He died in this bed, in this room. They said history belongs to the ages. This is President Lincoln died in this room at 7:22, April 15th, 1865. Well, my friends, we're gonna call it a day. Thank you all for watching. Have a great night from historic Ford's Theater and the boarding house where Lincoln passed away. We'll see you all next time from Washington, D.C. Goodbye.